the games begin!
I define, establish, exercise, and practice. Externalize spatial maps as I attack the path of mature learner. Bottle burner, max memory reserve, and earnest. I'm a furnace, an anomaly, sibling of Simonides known to reduce cognitive load. And oh, how I rotate, juggling space, making a case for brain games so digital amnesia leaves you. Digital dementia is censured. Did y'all tag Herenium on your mind wall? Review, recall, we will evolve. Brain games, synapses flashing, mind palace crashing with brain games. Info encoded, mental high roller. Brain games, synapses flashing, mind palace crashing with the brain games. Info encoded, mental high roller. This is not a game you can afford to lose.
Why?
Brain games, don't need an app for that. I just attack with the path of a lab rat. I mean scientist, I'm an annihilist, finalist, illuminist, numinous, doing this, proving this, who is this scholar? Dopamine fiend, clean sheen like the Pleiades, enemies, illities, killing with abilities, strolling with affinity, rolling with McKinney. Brain games, healthy snacks, build a palace, pick some facts, learn to balance while you rap, unleash talents, don't look back. Brain games, synapses flashing, mind palace crashing with the brain games. Info encoded, mental high roller. Brain games, synapses flashing, mind palace crashing with the brain game. Info encoded, mental high roller. Scholar. MagneticMemoryMethod.com.
Good morning, everybody. David's in the house. Hello, David. And hello, everybody who's here today. Thank you for being here. And let's talk about something very, very powerful from bringgratitude.com. What is the hardest part about being you? This reminds me of a story where I had to learn about the power of gratitude the hard way. And it was back during a particularly troubling period where I was taking a course, and one of the exercises in the course was about making a treasure map, making a visualization of how you were going to create the future that you wanted. And it was kind of a weird thing, but I didn't have a job at the time. I had no idea how I was going to get one. And it was an unusual time to be in, especially because I had done a major research grant and I was applying for major positions at universities. And I was blowing these interviews, not because of anything with my memory, but simply because of the political climate at the time. And also just me being me instead of pretending to be the person that maybe those people wanted to see in those rooms. If you've ever done anything in a scholarly setting, there's usually committees, and then there are people who come with a lot of egos to the table, and you have to essentially not outshine other people at some level and yet still convince them that you're the star that they want on their committee and that you're not going to, make anything happen that would outshine their ego, but at the same time, you're still going to be like a major contributor, et cetera, et cetera. So I was flopping these interviews and I wound up in a program that was basically going to retrain me how to get a job. And it was just the weirdest thing. Just go with the flow sort of thing. And I thought, well, what the heck? I mean, I obviously don't know how to get a job. And so I'll get one. And while I'm waiting, I will take this course on how to write resumes better, because I had spent years as a university student. I worked all kinds of jobs and so forth, but I really needed to train to get in the job market. I had no real interest in starting a business or anything like that. And yet here we are in this room, and we're given piles of magazines to cut up images from, sailboats, homes that you might want, et cetera, et cetera. And then you're supposed to make a collage on a piece of paper, and they were calling it a treasure map, to show you how it is that your mind, what it is that you wanted to see it visually, and then you would, create a path on how you're going to do this. I thought this was the most ridiculous thing. I was in such a negative frame of mind, such a mindset of entitlement, et cetera, et cetera. I just thought, I got a PhD. I had made one of Germany's biggest research grants you're ever going to get, and now these major universities in this area that I found myself in Canada are just rejecting my applications left, right, and center, even though, I got to the interview stage, etc. It was just like this weird mindset place. And so what I did is, instead of the other people who were cutting out sailboats and homes that they wanted to own and all this sort of stuff, I cut out the most darkest imagery that you could imagine, and I made the most bizarre, surreal image, looked like something out of a David Lynch movie, and that was my image for my future. Abstract, just dark and bizarre and strange, and that was a reflection of where my head was at, which was not useful. It was not useful. And so I suffered a little bit longer with this kind of attitude. And finally, I learned about things like gratitude journaling and so forth. And that started to change. But I had to be willing to start to do it. I had to be willing to try things again that I didn't think were going to work, and needed to pick better images to put in my mind. And so I want to share Karl Staib, I believe that's how you pronounce the name. He sent me a lovely letter here about his Bring Gratitude cards and some suggestions on how to use them. And one of the first things that I saw when I was flipping through them is, what is the hardest part of being you? And I thought, wow, that's like a really challenging question here. But then it says, how has this part made you a stronger person? And one of the things that this story that I just shared with you, how it helped make me a stronger person, was simply that I was able to see my own BS for what it was, right on the table. As other people were actually entertaining the exercise, they were actually doing what the teacher told. I have no idea what happened to them in their lives, but one thing that I do know is that if I hadn't turned this around, if I had continued to make abstract, bizarre, dark, negative pictures of what it was that I wanted to accomplish, I would have kept going in that dark, negative area. And that is very bad for your brain health. It's very bad for your brain. And I was just very fortunate to find other things. But how that made me a stronger person was that I learned to be willing to try things that I didn't believe in, and then actually go and look and see what science might be there, because I've always been a very scientific person, even to a fault. And it can be faulty because science is a tool. And if you continually always need to have all the evidence that convinces you before you try things, you might lock yourself out of where you're trying to go. And I certainly have done that several times. By the same token, there's a lot of experiments that you wouldn't really want to be doing if there wasn't good reason to do them. And so I was very lucky to read 59 Seconds by Richard Weissman, for example, that helped me be more scientific about things for which that I hadn't seen evidence before, but provided evidence in particular ways. And gratitude journaling was part of them. So I started to do that, and it was huge. So on today's session, thanks everybody who has said hello already, Mr. Space and Daryl and Sean Tate. Good to see you all. If you're joining us, hit that thumbs up. Let me know where you are in the world, what you're doing, what you're thinking. I dropped some of these cards here, picked them up, and any questions you have. We're going to talk about memorizing some of these things that we come up with. I'm going to take this exercise that Karl has put together for you on these Bring Gratitude cards and extend them to a memory exercise and a positive affirmation exercise, because, well, we'll get into that as we're here. But as we're warming up, I want to say hello again to Mr. Space, Daryl, Sean, and David. Hit the thumbs up if you're just joining us. Let me know where you are in the world, what you're doing, what you're thinking. One of these cards has the benefits of gratitude, and it says here, you can be 31% more productive if you're more grateful. You can build a more resilient mindset. You can improve your memory, which absolutely I can attest to personally, and have seen lots of research about that. You can find creative solutions to difficult problems and grow your confidence just by having more gratitude. Of course, gratitude is not necessarily positive affirmations, but I'm going to talk about how you can take these cards and turn them into positive affirmations and then memorize those positive affirmations. But I want to really recommend everybody go visit bringgratitude.com to see what Karl's up to. And one of the cool things here is it's got a sort of memory palace element to it, because what he's showing in this letter is a toothbrush glass in the bathroom, and just standing one of these cards right where you'll see it every day, assuming you brush your teeth, which I hope you do. It's very important for your brain health. The health of your gums, the health of all your teeth has a lot to do with the health of your brain, the health of your gut, the health of your lungs, all this stuff. It's like unbelievable. The number one path to misery is not taking care of your teeth. I was reading something about the old folks back in the day who worked in the in the coal mines and all that stuff. And one of the things they said is, you read their old journals and stuff, and they would often make references to how they wish that they could just get rid of their teeth because it was even more miserable to have rotting teeth than it was to work in the coal mines. So take care of your teeth at all costs, at all costs. Very, very important to do that. All right. So we've got some claims here made on Karl's first card about what gratitude can do for you. I think you can push it, and I think you can make better positive affirmations. But if you're struggling with your memory and you can't remember to do things, I absolutely love this. Just simple cards you can get. And by the way, I'm not in any way getting paid for this recommendation. He just sent them to me. So if I've been paid, I got these cards sent in the mail. But that's just me sharing this because I thought that they're really cool. And what a cool idea. So basically what these cards are going to do is prompt you to do gratitude exercises or things that are related to rebooting your mindset. And I just love that one. What's the hardest part of being you? And it's beautiful that we are us, we are we. And one of the things is that it's not necessarily always easy to be you. And so when you think about it, what's the hardest part of being you? And for me, it was, as I shared in that story, being negative, being dark, being abstract. That's very, very hard. And the weirdest part about it is that it's so much work. It's so much work being negative. You can't imagine how painful it is just to think about how painful it was being me for so many years, because I put so much hard work into demonstrating to myself how bad the world was, how terrible it was, how painful it was. Man, I'm just super annoyed at myself for doing that. But then you have this other question here. How has this part made you a stronger person? And at the end of the day, all those tools of being so negative have actually helped me in being more positive, really being consistent and persistent day after day after day with gratitude journaling, which I still do to this day. And it's very, very powerful and fun. And this has only helped and accelerated it. So I'm really grateful to Karl for sending these along. And I just want to help spread the word. Again, there's no particular payoff here. Not accepting any corporate fees or anything. I don't believe that Karl is a corporation, but I just love this. And the idea of putting them right where you're going to see them every day with your toothbrush is really, really powerful. And, I always share my journals and stuff like that. The physical object is so important so that you don't miss it. You don't forget to journal because your journal is constantly in your face, right? You don't forget to do things that you see, or at least I struggle with that. If you hide something from me, it's out of sight, out of mind. I'll have to use memory techniques to remember it. And every chance that you get, part of what makes the magnetic memory method so magnetic is you make it so that you don't have to remember things. You don't have to use exaggerated tools in order to get things done. And so putting these up somewhere just to prompt you, it's just genius. It's brilliant. And we'll talk about some of the reasons why that is genius as well. Maricela is in the house, says hello to everybody. Thank you for being here, Maricela. Thanks for saying hello. Daryl says, just started oil pull, so grateful for coconut oil. Cool, cool, cool. Glad that you're grateful for that. And Shawn says, love this talk. Love that you're here. Thank you so much for being here. If you're joining us, hit the thumbs up. Let me know where you are in the world, what you're doing, what you're thinking. And if you have anything you're grateful for, like Shawn said, please do. Or Daryl said that he's grateful for coconut oil, and Shawn says every morning he does a gratefulness exercise. If you are grateful for things, share them. I'm grateful for you. Really grateful for all the positive response to these live streams and to the YouTube videos and so forth. That's wonderful. And every day I write out at least 10 things that I'm grateful for. And today just the usual stuff. It doesn't get repetitive. It doesn't get boring. And one of the things that I think it does is it really just helps you focus on the present moment. And I think there's a couple of other things that are interesting. And there may be some pitfalls. So we'll cover that today as well. Mr. Space is swearing. Oh my goodness, in the live chat. Mr. Space, this is a perfect example of how our language can really be tidied up, perhaps, so that we don't have so much negative stuff in our heads. And Daryl says oil pulling. I actually don't know what you mean by oil pulling, but sounds fascinating. Sounds fascinating. All right, so before we get any deeper into this live stream, though, thanks to everybody who is signed up and registered for Study Hacks Live. If you haven't yet, make sure to register your interest and get registered. Go to magneticmarymethod.com/SHL. Not going to dwell on this too long right now, but there's still room for people. Been doing a lot of experiments with this. Thank you for everybody who wants to engage in this experiment to see if this is the kind of thing that is going to be part of the path forward with the Magnetic Mary Method initiative and give those people who really need a live training experience to happen, because these are general sessions, but we're going to go deep into the specific techniques on this, and make sure that you don't miss this if you're interested in joining us for Study Hacks Live. Maybe that's not the best name for it, but so far so good. All right. So, does gratitude really work? Does it really work? And if so, why? Well, I'm not a neuroscientist. I can only speculate, but reading Stephen Kosslyn, for example, The Case for Mental Imagery, and other books in neuroscience and material from neuroscientists, there's a couple of things that are all too obvious, which is that our memories are encoded in chemicals. And if we go into our memories, think about the things that we're grateful for, we're stirring those chemicals up. Not only that, but the neural networks are strengthening. So the more that we remember what we're grateful for, the more we strengthen those memories, which gives us fortitude to go forward. And it gives us discernment about negative ideas that we have. Because the more we focus on positive things, the less power the negative things are going to have. That's certainly been my experience, and I think it's all just accounted for in basic neurochemistry. And if you accept that there is such a thing as a brain, and that you accept that it's made out of chemicals, then it only makes sense that you would fortify those chemicals with good things and accept fewer bad things into them. Now, there's always going to be bad things in the world because the world is what it is, right? And so then you need strategies to make sure that you get more good things in and less bad things in. And you can just generally take the good things that are already in there and stir them up whenever you want, ideally in the morning before you do anything else. So I always write down, I'm grateful for my wife, grateful for having a roof over my head, grateful for water, grateful for food, grateful for all of you, grateful for, whatever comes up, the people who help make this mission possible, for example, on Team Magnetic. And you just re-experience, as Shawn is saying here, many, many grateful memories. And I think it's more than re-experiencing them. You fortify them as tools to draw upon later. And then you ultimately don't even think about the negative things that are going on because you're just in a state of gratitude. So that's really, really important. However, there may be some pitfalls, and I think we should talk about them, because I was listening to a podcast the other day. I'm not going to mention what it was yet because I haven't finished the whole episode, and I think there's a really negative behavior on the internet, which is that people share things that they haven't actually fully considered. So I'm not entirely sure that I'm going to share this episode, but it was recommended to me by one of you, and there may be some problems with it, but nonetheless, I think that one thing that she raises on the podcast, this is a neuroscientist, if I understood her career correctly, one of the problems with what she's saying is she doesn't give any examples. So she's criticizing the self-help industry, but she doesn't name a single text that bears the mark of the criticisms that she's landing. So I will only share it after I've reviewed it and see if there's actually any evidence and references that she's pointing out. Because I don't think she's wrong necessarily, but without examples, how do we verify that she's actually done any research and just not generalizing? And one of the problems with 59 seconds that I often point out is that Richard Weissman starts off with the banhammer on all kinds of NLP and related things, but he doesn't really do enough to substantiate that, and he focuses on evidence in the positive. And so I always point out that sort of flaw in 59 seconds, insofar as it is a flaw, but it's an oddity, it's a paradox, because so much of what the people who criticize self-help that can lead to trouble. But in another way, often those accusations just don't pan out because those people aren't reading the sources they're criticizing carefully enough. So I'm not going to mention what this podcast is because I haven't myself listened to it carefully enough. I stopped halfway through because I got tired of hearing her indict the self-help industry without one single example. However, what she's saying there, and it is kind of a potential pitfall with these cards. And that is that these are very I-oriented cards. They're about you, right? And that's a problem with gratitude in a certain sense, because for one thing, you don't exist. You might think you do, but you don't. There's no neuroscientific evidence that the ego, the I, actually is produced by the brain. It may be produced by things that are larger forces, but the illusion of you being who you think you are is a very problematic and troubling thing. We don't necessarily have all the answers. I certainly don't. But the absence of evidence that there is even an I is problematic. And that's part of what she's using in her indictment of the self-help industry, is that there is no I. And yet the self-help industry, in her view, constantly causes you to focus on the illusion of your I as a resource that you can draw upon. So I think she's very, very right there. But I don't know which books that she's talking about, or which gurus or which programs she's talking about where that happens. Because I have a feeling if I go and look at those indictments, she won't actually have a good example of it. Because I can't think of very many self-help books that don't point out at some point that your I doesn't exist, right? That you need to be thinking larger than yourself, or the you that you think you are. And that if you really want to be liberated from suffering, you have to set yourself goals and things to do that are bigger than you. So there are some pitfalls, to be sure, if you misunderstand this and you think that it's all about I, me, etc., etc. That's no good. What's very good is to think about this in terms of the larger framework in which you don't exist, and there's no evidence that you exist, at least not as you think you do. So that's a bit of a pitfall here, and just, sort of some examples that you might want to consider is, well, what do you really want out of your life? So as a gratitude exercise, that's a bit problematic, right? Because it can lead you into a prison, because you don't necessarily know what you want for your life, because you don't necessarily even exist, right? It's very, very, very tricky there. And it's also the kind of thing where you might be, well, I don't know what I want out of my life. It can cause sorts of a sort of depression there if you don't know. But of course, this is a deck of cards. You don't just work with one. You don't just focus on one. But this can also lead to issues like I had, for example, when I first started to learn gratitude journaling and journaling for vision statements and so forth. I was thinking constantly about what the girlfriend I wanted at the time wanted for her life. And that made me miserable. So, and no doubt, right? Because what she wanted is not really what I wanted. And so all the memory sort of stuff that comes out of that can put you in the prison you're trying to escape. So you need to figure that out. Likewise here, like, what do you do better than most people you know? And that can be a bit problematic as well, because what if you just don't think that way? I'm not really a person who thinks in better or worse, I don't have a competitive bone in my body. So that can be a bit of a trouble as well. And someone like Jordan Peterson would point out that there's a lot of research that your brain actually produces or reduces the serotonin that you have based on where you think you are in a hierarchy. So if you're playing a game of comparisons, what do you do better than other people? That can actually rig your brain chemistry against you, not for you. So I really would recommend that you be aware of those sorts of things. And they certainly are things that can help, but they can also make more trouble than they're worth. And I'm always very cautious about comparing myself with anybody else because of the brain chemistry element of your brain tracking where you are in a hierarchy. And it can say, oh, well, I haven't made it yet because I don't have as many likes or views or whatever as so-and-so. Who cares, right? Well, your brain actually does, it turns out, or so the evidence is showing, because of serotonin. So one of the things that I've learned to do is just simply not think that way and just be grateful that other people are there, quote unquote, doing better than I am, but knowing that there could never really be better or worse, because the more people who are helping others improve their memory, the better it is for everybody, right? And what's the worst that can happen? Nothing. There's nothing that can happen. And that's why part of the magnetic memory method ethic is to have as many memory experts on the podcast and this channel as possible who are willing to serve, simply to help remove that issue of comparison, but rather how can we contribute together? How can we do the most for the most people as a unit beyond any individual? And some people like to play that way. Other people don't. And if they don't, then that's fine. But anyway, cautions, pitfalls, potential pitfalls. And I don't mean to say anybody shouldn't get these cards. They should. But at the end of the day, watch out for that stuff, because you don't want to lead yourself into the prisons that you're trying to escape. All right, so before we carry on, let's check in with the chat and see what we've got going on here. Thanks, everybody who is joining us live and has filled up the chat with comments and questions. Hit the thumbs up. Let me know where you are in the world, what you're doing, what you're thinking. And let's see here. So Robert said, neural net strengthening to empower and embolden the wire together. Fortification of good information is a brilliant way to look at the happiness quotient. That's right. Yeah. Thank you for that, Robert. And one of the things, too, that we might interrogate here is the word happiness. Now, it's just shorthand. It fits on the screen better. But really what we should say rather than happiness is maybe something like eudaimonia, which is the ancient Greek for happiness, which really means flourishing. And what is flourishing? Well, flourishing is not happy days every single day. It just means continual growth, ongoing growth. And the way that you grow in an ongoing way is through consistent application of the things that make you grow. That's why memory and learning projects are so dang important, because the more that you know, the more you can know, and most importantly, the more humble you grow, because you're able to recognize just how much more you don't know, but that you could know, which would expand what you don't know, which increases your humbleness and your curiosity. And so it's just win-win across the board. Very, very important. And so that's something to think about, is just the status of the word happiness itself. Is it really that useful? Whereas something more like flourishing or well-being are much stronger terms, I think. All right, Bulldog in the mix. All right, Bulldog in the mix. Love that name. Thanks for being here. Thanks for saying hello. Tommy Duncan says, well said. Thank you. Sean says, every morning I do a 10-minute meditation, a 15-minute gratitude experience involving forgiving others and envisioning things I want to accomplish and seeing them happening, and morning power questions. Excellent, Sean. Thanks for sharing that. And yeah, forgiving others is an important thing. And just generally, I don't know if love is the right word, but just sending them good vibes, One of the things that I've always loved is Eric Weinstein has something that he calls the let me think here, what is it? The word, I've got the ugly sister effect. Every other word is coming except for this one. But it's not the bad guy exercise. It's one of these words that'll come to me if I stop trying to get it. But what he's talking about is you got to basically pick your enemy. But it's not really your enemy. It's someone who you wish would win if you had to lose against them. So you set them up in your mind, and you really want that person to be the person who's going to, succeed even if you don't, and you be happy for them to succeed. And it's kind of a weird thing. I've had several of them in my life. They're very, very important to have. And they help stimulate you. They help you think things through. And I can't believe the power of the ugly sister effect right now that's coming up. The evil Dr. Forget has me in his grips. Unbelievable. Anyway, you got to look that up. It's really, really, really a great video. And I should have thought about it beforehand so that you could check it out. But look up Eric Weinstein, and I'm sure by the time that we leave, this word that he has in the title will come to my mind. I usually don't have this so long, so bad, but it's because I'm pushing it, and that's a lesson for you. Don't push it too hard when you have the ugly sister effect, because it'll only just push the information you're looking for away. Then all of a sudden, when you let it go, it'll come. All right, so let's check in with the chat furthermore here. Daryl says, I love the evolution of your explanation over the last year or so. You sound more and more like a Vedantin every day. Oh, thank you, Daryl. I suppose that the Vedantin response would be to say, yes, except for no, because there are no Vedantins. But, yeah, there's been something like an evolution there, I suppose, because the more that I actually do the application, the more that I think it just resolves itself, and the patterns, the conditioning go away. And, I still have thought, which is the main project. The project is not necessarily to be a Vedantin, but the project is to reduce and potentially eliminate thought. And I've had some periods now where I didn't think it was possible, but where thought just unbelievable. It's the most amazing thing. It's exquisite. So it's been worth it. It's been worth it. And the neat thing is that even in the presence of thought, there's stronger and stronger this deep ocean of just nothing going on, so to speak. But we're not there yet. We're not there yet. We keep working for it. We keep working for it. And how do you do it? Well, you just continue to show up. And in the deep history, some of these gratitude exercises that I've done were a huge part, I think, of establishing that as a possibility. Sean says, currently going for a promotion and focusing on performing better than I have the last round and less on being better than the competition. Yeah, that's important. The thing is that competition is normal. Like, we're sort of forced to compete at some level, but compete inside of what? What is the realm in which we're competing? Is it really competition inside of this larger ecosystem of human behavior? And it can't really be that in its way. If it is, it's in such a microscopic, small little sense of what's really going on in reality. Chroma Moonwalking, thank you so much for your super chat. I don't know why your stuff doesn't show up on the screen, but let me post that for you. Thank you for supporting this work today. Thanks to everybody who's been super chatting and so forth. Really appreciate it. Your support is very much just so grateful for it. And it's just part of the evolution here, I guess, of this project. And obviously it helps me continue helping you. And I think more importantly, it tells the robots that people really care, which helps grow the community. So if you're just joining us, hit the thumbs up. Let me know where you are in the world, what you're doing, what you're thinking. And if you're not subscribed, get subscribed to this channel if you like memory training topics and everything memory. And the really powerful thing about training your memory consistently is that you begin to see what it really is. You begin to see and experience a kind of different level of reality of what it is and how it works. And you let it go. You let it be what it is, even though you tend it. Sort of like a farmer tends the field, does the best that the farmer can, and then lets it go. All right. Daryl says the silence is always there. It seems to be. It appears to be. Of course, our word, silence, is not what it is. One thing that Shinzen Young says in The Science of Enlightenment that really struck me was that whatever it is that you experience, inquire into that as well. So if you get, whenever you get a sense that you have somehow gotten something, then you also need to inquire into that, because you can't dig too deeply into, what shall we say, the process of the digging. So whatever revelations that we've had and so forth, we need to dig even deeper and deeper into that, which I think is very wise and sage advice, because whatever we think is happening, we are processing it in this brain. And a lot of people think that this little 3-pound thing somehow has the ability to conceive of the whole universe, what silence even is, etc. This 3-pound thing in your skull, in my skull, it doesn't understand everything. It ain't going to understand everything. It has no path to doing it whatsoever. It's just not going to happen. It's not going to happen. All right. So, Kirigami, thanks for being here, says, how can you think without thoughts? Well, that's the whole point, Kirigami. You're not thinking, or at least you don't know that you're thinking. Now, there's something called PNSE, which is persistent non-symbolic experience, and that's essentially what this is said to be. And so, persistent non-symbolic experience, the whole point is, Kirigami, that you're not thinking, right? You're not thinking in words, at least. But from what I've understood from the research of Dr. Jeffrey Martin, When they do the brain scans of people who have persistent non-symbolic experience, which would be more or less not having thoughts, they're still making decisions. Their brains are still making decisions. So I don't know exactly the answer to your question. Constantly, I need to do this, I need to do that, I need, I want. You're telling stories about that because there's often a because, right? So I need to do this because of X. And this creates great suffering. It does all kinds of stuff to your brain chemistry. As I mentioned, serotonin gets yanked around, especially when you're playing a game of comparisons, because a lot of the story you tell yourself about I need to do this, I need to do that, is part of a narrative of who you think you are and what you think is going to happen in the future. And that's problematic because it may influence how you make decisions and so forth, but you aren't really aware of why and how you are making decisions. You really only have a story to tell about the decisions that you made. So I told you a story earlier about how that I made this vision statement thing that was ugly, it was dark, it was abstract, it was surreal, very David Lynch sort of stuff. I don't know why that I did it that way. I only can tell you the story. And I don't know exactly why I decided to start doing things differently. I can just tell you that it happened, and I can justify it and rationalize it a zillion ways from here until Sunday. But the really important thing to understand is that there's a lot of fate and chance and luck in my decision to do differently. So even though I don't know exactly why that I decided to do things differently, what seems to be so is that by exposing myself to the material that prompts you to do that stuff, something in my deep neural network made a decision to start implementing. And so that's why if you continue to just expose yourself to certain kinds of ideas that are prompting you to take better actions, you're much more likely to actually take actions, even if the decision happens outside of your awareness, which it almost certainly will. This is why frequency is such an important part of, for example, the work that I'm doing here. There's no chance at all that I will convince you to improve your memory or continue to inspire you to be consistent with improving your memory if I just show up once in a while. But if it's a consistent thing and it has frequency and relevance to you again and again and again, and it engages you and hopefully entertains you a little bit, I know I'm not the most entertaining figure under the sun, but that frequency is going to just mathematically put more chance into the great game of the great lottery of life that ding, 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 it's going to make more sense to more people. So we keep showing up again and again and again. And the more of you keep showing up to help with that, then the more ding, 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 and the more people get prompted to just find any memory training, which makes everything better because it's just a numbers game. It's just churning through the mass of humanity. And the more we can get into it, the more we can make it grow, then the more the memory tradition has a chance to survive. Nemesis, that's the word that I was looking for. See, if you let it go, it comes. Get back to that in a second. But do you see how that works? It's just a numbers game. And so frequency is really, really important. So Daryl says, the truth is unspeakable. The confines of language are quite restricting. Yeah, that's true. It's one of the issues. But I got to get to Chrome Walking Super Chat here. Sorry. What about a memory? I posted it, but I was saying thank you and drifted off. And then I got my nemesis back. Thank you for your patience, Chrome Walking. What about a memory palace just for affirmations? Yes. And we're going to talk about that. But to be more direct, absolutely. And that's where I want to share with you an exercise that I came up with out of Karl's wonderful cards here from bringgratitude.com. I hope you'll support what he's doing there, at least check it out, visit his website and so forth. And one of the numerical things, why I'm doing this without being asked to, although maybe there is the indication that I might by sending these to me in the first place, is that I know the numbers game, and the more people that end up knowing about his work, the more likely it's going to help more people around the planet, etc., etc. So it really is a sort of numerical thing. And that's why, yes, a memory palace just for affirmations works, and it can be a memory palace for actual affirmations, or it can be just for quotes that make you feel better. It can be song lyrics that cheer you up. It can be actual memories that you've lived. And we'll talk more about this. But absolutely chromo walking. And it's very simple to do. You can just start with a simple room, 4 corners, 4 walls, encode some good stuff in there, and practice it. But let me check in more with the chat before we talk a little bit more deeply about that. Daryl says the truth is unspeakable and the confines of language are quite restricting. That's worth repeating because it is so. However, the restriction of language is not necessarily negatively restricting because all constraints are productive at some level. And language constraints are especially productive when we actually focus on becoming better with language. So there's a number of ways to do that. And memorizing things is one of the ways, the most direct ways to get better at language and expression and working within those constraints so that they are more productive because you understand the situations in which that you're able to express things in particular ways and really iterate from the knowledge of your, how shall we say it, your fluidity, your dexterity with expression, with the pool of language that's out there. As with all things, there can be a trap because you could be using super elevated diction and nobody can understand what the heck you're saying. Although, that said, some people will like to listen to you anyway, and it might even help them improve their English, as I've seen on the podcast before. And people, emailing me, and like Jesse Villalobos, he was on the podcast actually, and he had emailed me and he said, one thing I love about the podcast is it helps me improve my vocabulary because you use all these big words. And, that can be a dangerous thing because some people will say, oh my goodness, I can't understand what this guy's saying because he uses too many big words. I don't think I use that many big words, but nonetheless, that was cool. And he found that he was getting his vocabulary improved, not only because I use words like that, but it encourages him to go out and look it up, whatever those words may be that he's referring to, memorize them, then his vocabulary improves, which improves his diction, his ability to express, and his ability to deal with the constraints of language, because more words puts more weight on the constraints and helps you express differently in different situations and then have multiple ways of expressing things. So when you can see people aren't following the plot, which happens when I speak live in particular, I'll know just by the way people look that I might need to rephrase that, put it in different words and so forth. So lots there, of course. But let me get quickly back to this nemesis thing. And what's really weird about the nemesis thing is I kept looking for a word that started with the letter A, and all of these other words were coming. It was just bizarre. But the Eric Weinstein video I was referring to is about finding your nemesis and how important that is. Now, I'm not going to say who my previous nemesis was, but I had one for many, many years and no longer available except for as a memory. But so I need another one and been feeling a bit lost actually since that I can no longer use this particular nemesis. But the whole point is, in order to avoid playing games of comparison, which can really mess with your chemistry levels, or so some of the research suggests. You'll have to look in on that yourself to confirm or deny that. But what it does is, instead of playing a game of comparison, you set up the person that you want to compete with very deliberately, and then you make sure that you make it a person that you would want to succeed, even if it's at the cost of you not succeeding. And you still, quote unquote, try to compete with them, but really inspired by what they're trying to do in a way that lends support to what they're trying to do, instead of trying to take anything away, instead of being scarce about it. But rather, you often find and see if you can work together in certain ways and collaborate in certain ways, even if you must have your own missions, etc. So that nemesis concept is very, very powerful, and I encourage everybody to look up Eric Weinstein and his nemesis video. All right, so I'm glad I got it back. Took a little longer than I would have liked, but as things go, they go. And as they come, they come. Amazing. Wonderful. All right, so Sean says, one of my favorite talks. Okay, so I assume you're referring to the Eric Weinstein one. Let's see here. David says, I stopped listening to all news and politics months ago. There is no gratitude to be found there. My serenity has vastly improved. Also, I will not discuss politics with anyone anymore. That's great, David. And you say, don't poison yourself with sources of ingratitude. Yeah, I'm not entirely able to remove politics from my life. I have a very deep pattern. I started in university as a political science major. I switched to English literature because I noticed that I was very, very negative about it. And I worried after I met my first, well, I'd met a politician before that in the form of the mayor and the local representative of the NDP in Canada. So I knew a little bit, and I'd met him, and he knew my dad for some reason, and he'd been at our house, I don't know, canvassing or whatever, but somehow he knew my dad in a strange way. I don't know the whole story. But later, when I was in my first year of university working for the paper, I met the premier at the time of British Columbia, and I interviewed him for the paper. And in that moment, I knew I never want to be this guy. I never want to be like this. And even though I loved political science, and I still continued with one more political science course after that without dropping it, even though I thought I should. It was at least the history of political philosophy, which was good. But I had to stop. I knew it would not go to a good place. So that was very interesting. But I've always still been interested in politics and history, political theory, political philosophy, etc. And it's very, very dear to me, and I can't totally give it up, but I have to put myself on diets about it. I also think in my job I have to pay attention to some of these things because there are freedom of expression issues going on that I have to watch so I don't endanger this channel, etc. Even though sometimes I may have. It's crazy times, but interesting times that we need to really pay attention to. So I can't totally unplug, even if I might like to, and it's also just a deep, deep procedural memory habit to follow and read and think about political things. And I've heard from some deep and accomplished Buddhist practitioners of meditation that they think that the most ethical thing to do after their awakening is to comment on politics. And, I don't know if that's right or wrong, but that's what they've said. Interesting stuff. Sandra is in the house. Good to see you, Sandra. Thanks for saying hello. And Sean says, focus less on expectations and more on appreciations. Indeed, indeed. And I think that expectation, as they say, is the quickest path to suffering. Quickest path to suffering. If we expect things, then we can't pay attention to the immediate moment as completely as possible. And we may be playing that game of comparison that rigs our serotonin against us and causes pain, right? And we also have the insular cortex involved in here. So read Barbara Oakley on this. Her book Mind Shift is incredible. She talks more about the insular cortex and pain and how that certain tasks, our brain perceives certain tasks and it creates a pain response in response to them. So when you think that a thing should go in this or that way, you could be triggering the insular cortex, which gives a pain spike, which is no good. You don't want that. Ooh, I shouldn't even snap at that in case that anchoring is real. I don't know if it is, but do other sorts of positive anchoring if it is real. Harvinder is in the house. Namaste, Harvinder. Thanks for being here. Good morning to you in India. Always a pleasure to see such an accomplished member of our mastermind. Thank you for being here. Wonderful, wonderful. All right. Daryl says you can also learn to expect the appreciations. Yeah, and that's a problem, right? So one of the biggest things of enlightenment sickness is the thing that if you get somewhere in your spiritual journey, if in your meditation journey or whatever, and then you start to expect that things are going to stay that way, woo, you're looking for trouble. You're cruising for a bruising because you can't just, rest on your laurels. You got to continue, as Shinzen Young says in the Science of Enlightenment, you got to continue to put that stuff up to self-inquiry, to interrogation, to find what's beneath that thing because you're still on the surface. I mean, arguably, as long as you keep appearing in the world, you're still in the world. You're not there yet. You're not back to oneness. Or you're somehow going to participate in the illusion of duality just simply by the nature of the way the brain works. But that doesn't mean you can't submit the illusion of duality to continual self-inquiry and interrogation. All right. Kirigami says, a thoughtless mind letting things happen kind of automatically. Very intriguing. What are your methods of getting into this thoughtless state of mind? Even one of my college professors told me the same thing. Great. Well, Kirigami, there are a lot of methods for doing it. And one of the problems that we have is that a lot of people will say, this is the way to do it. That's not clear. There's probably, I don't know, there's certainly not an infinite number of ways. There's probably, let's say, 3 to 9 ways. I don't know how many ways there are. Probably you're going to need a mixture of them over time, and you need to pay each of them their due, or at least some of them their due, and they bridge together in interesting ways. And the more you practice with that variety, the more you will find the ways. So some of the ways, well, let's see. Meditation, whatever that means, is one of them. So a daily meditation, sitting just to sit, I think that was very powerful for me, although now I think it probably slowed my progress by just doing that for as long as I did. But by the same token, it also just set the framework for whatever happened, right? So I don't think there's a right or wrong to it, and there's no point in really criticizing the past. But that's what I did, and I really focused on it. And I had a lot of dogma around it because I created a story about what I thought that Alan Watts was saying about sitting just to sit. And I think that that's both good in its way, and it wasn't as good as it could have been if I had been more open to other things. But for whatever reason at that time, that was what I had, and that's the way it went. Just fine with that. But in any case, sitting just to sit is one, and obviously you want to be doing this consistently. Focus on at least 4 times a week. Breathing, you can, like, I'm not so interested myself in, focusing just on breathing through my nostrils. I never was, but I have done many other breathing things, such as alternate psychic nostril breathing, not psychic in the sense of reading someone's mind, but psychologically focusing on the left nostril as you breathe in, then focusing on the right nostril as you breathe out, rotating that, alternating it, hence alternate psychic nostril breathing. There's other things like breath withholding, which I've done a lot of work with, and that's really awesome, a lot of fun. And then there's things like stretching. There's different stretches you can do. You can do stretching with what's called neti, which is just not this, not this. So as you stretch, you mentally make a mark that, you are not the experience that you're having. Your body is not what you really are. Your thoughts are not you. You are not your thoughts. And neti is just shorthand for I am not these things that are happening in my mind right now. And just through that process of, you're essentially labeling thought. You're labeling mental and physical experience as not what you are, which helps you divide who you think you are and that stuff going through your mind from the actual experience that you're having. And whatever that experience is happening now and only now, and there's all kinds of change going on in front of you, none of which is you, but you are the observer of those things. And so that's another strategy, and you can do this while you're walking. My favorite strategy, my preferred strategy, I think the one that just rocketed me into a whole new way of experiencing this, even though it was very much what I was already experiencing anyway, I just couldn't see it, was memorizing Sanskrit and chanting it daily. Now, it's astonishing to me that I've been able to do this without missing a single day for more than 2.5 years now. But I have, and I continue to memorize more and more and more and more, and it's getting longer and longer and longer, and it's so deeply satisfying. But the neat thing about it there is that it increases the understanding of what those old dudes were trying to teach, because it actually is in the chemistry. And the chemistry then perceives itself differently. I don't know exactly how to describe it all, but it is something I highly, highly recommend. And so Evolving Beyond Thought has 32 passages from the Ribhu Gita. I've recited them all with my eyes closed on this channel. Maybe I will do it again at some point. Maybe today. I don't know. I'm still not quite done the Upadesa Sharam. I used to pronounce it Saram, but I learned that it's actually Sharam. So that is amazing. And then there's some of the Bhagavad Gita that I have memorized. And I'm not that fond of the text, but it's still kind of got some good stuff in it. And then the other thing is the Atma Bodha, which I've been working with. Except for the Atma Bodha, I'm not working with in Sanskrit because I haven't found it yet in Sanskrit. I've found it in a great English translation. And all those things combined have helped kick me out of the idea that I exist, so to speak, more than anything else. So those are some things for you, Kirigami. Give them a try. And Happiness Beyond Thought is is really a book that I would recommend. Also, Evolving Beyond Thought, and the there's so much stuff. There's so much stuff. I think the point is that you would want to memorize things that help you get to the goal that you're looking for, which means you would set a goal, which is kind of odd when you think about it. It's paradoxical, right? Well, if you don't exist and you don't have free will, then how do you set goals and so forth? Well, you can actually, because there's a difference between free will and acts of will. And there's a difference between, the story that you're telling yourself about what's happening and the fact that decisions actually do get made in the world, etc. So that'd be the ultimate thing in meditation, I would think. And Gary Weber talks about this in Happiness Beyond Thought. Have a goal and then practice to achieve that goal. And pretty much everything else will just sort of unfold from there. Can you accelerate what's unfolding? I think so. But then you need to make decisions based on what it is that you want to do, etc. So that's quite interesting. And someone like Jeffrey Martin will talk about like actually choosing between different levels of accomplishment in these states that you can reach. And so, yeah, there's so much information out there. The question is, I resisted this sort of thing because a lot of the teachings say you've got to find a teacher, you've got to have a guru, and all this sort of jazz. And I just like, no, really? And then I had the opportunity to ask a teacher about this, and the answer he gave is really just for me, but I think it was the best possible answer that he could have given, and it helped me a great deal. And maybe I'll share that at some point, what that was. Perhaps I'll put it in the new book that I've written all about this. But thank you for your question, Kirigami. Robert Ford says, Anthony, how about a brief bit about how and when to get back on the horse if we've been thrown by life's traumas, turns, and inevitable bad moments? I personally take several approaches, one being to respect the troughs and crests of the inevitable waves that come and go, which also encourages developing awareness to show up to the various states we're in consciously, knowing when to lean into the harder moments to find the pearls down at the bottom of those troughs, and when to rest and reset, to return to a practitude of gratitude the following day. Great question, or great comment, suggestion. Yeah, so there's lots that can be said there, but the thing that comes to mind is I think one wants to create a system, so to speak, so that you don't have to struggle to get back on the horse. And that's going to require some design. It's going to require some, something like a goal or an outcome, even if it's not a perfect one, something that you're trying to accomplish, that you want to accomplish, that you really want to accomplish, and then a system that gets you there so that when you fall off the horse, you don't have to say, oh, well, how do I get back on the horse? You just have the things that you do. And then that is just doing those is being back on the horse. So even though I haven't skipped a day of meditation, I have certainly had days where it got close and I didn't do it in the morning, as is the best result. Do it later in the day, etc. But it's just a matter of getting started. And sometimes I will just sit for 10, 15, 30 minutes before I start to do the recitation. And I just allow that it may take time for the recitation to come. And I don't push it. I don't punish myself about it. And then all of a sudden I'll go, oh, wow, now I'm doing it. And it just seems to have started without me pushing for it, etc. Same thing with going to the gym. I go to the gym 3 days a week religiously. I very rarely go less than 3 days a week, except for every quarter, let's say, I'll take a week off, and that's because I read in some book you should. But sometimes I don't follow that, right? And actually, it does seem to help with muscle growth to take a week off every quarter. In any case, the very act of continuing to go seems to get it deep in the procedural memory. And then what do I do at the gym? Do I invent new things to do every single time? No, I do exactly the same thing that I did before. There's a day 1, there's a day 2, there's a day 3. And I just do all those things. I don't have to think about what they are. I don't have to hum and haw about it. Yeah, sometimes I'll throw in a variation or try something new, etc., etc., etc. But there's a core, deep thing in my mind that doesn't require memory of it. Now, in terms of getting knocked off and so forth, I'm trying to think of an example of where that may have happened, but one thing that comes to mind is, and I've told the story before, during my doctoral years where my professor who was supervising my PhD dissertation, he told me, I remember we were walking on the University of Toronto campus. Even though I went to York, we often spent a lot of time there. Maybe wishful thinking or so. I had been accepted to University of Toronto when I started my BA on a part-time basis, and the only reason why I didn't go is because I wanted to go full-time. And so I would have certainly been able to get into full-time at University of Toronto, but I was just kind of like, well, what's wrong with me that they only want to let me go in part-time? I had a spotty high school record. I guess that was part of it. But hey, I had a spotty high school life. Anyway, I chose the university that had enough faith in me to let me go full-time, and worked out just fine. But, revenge of poetic justice, I did wind up having, for a time, an actual study cubicle quasi-office in Robarts Library, all to myself, on the University of Toronto campus. So I got to go there one way or the other. Anyway, we were walking along, and he said, I got to tell you, things have changed in the academic world. It's very unlikely that you're going to, find a position at the end of all this. And it made me want to drop out. And I struggled with it. I had been living in New York at the time and was back to visit him. And we were walking around the University of Toronto campus. It was after my second field exam, if memory serves. And he gave me that speech about how hard it was and the shift and all kinds of politics going on campuses, et cetera, et cetera. And I remember being back in Manhattan looking out at the George Washington Bridge and just thinking that I just got to quit. But I remember justifying it was that it was something I had started, and so I was going to finish it. And I gave it the image of Mount Everest and how that it was, the PhD was just like Mount Everest. You either make it to the top or you don't, but it's there to be conquered. And so even if there's no more reason to conquer it anymore, first of all, there's no reason to believe that my doctoral supervisor was correct, even if he was giving me the reality pill. And second of all, there's nothing to be gained by stopping, because I would actually have over my head for the rest of my life that I had given up, I had quit, and I didn't want to be a quitter. So I just used essentially a mental metaphor to get myself back up onto the mountain and keep climbing. The other thing that I did is that I used affirmations, like we're going to talk about today, in the form of sort of self-hypnosis. So when I remember sitting in this apartment in Manhattan, and some of you may know the strategy that I used to write my dissertation, and I just did not want to write this dissertation a lot of the time because it's a lot of work. It's hundreds of pages, thousands of data points, etc., etc. And so I made myself a recording, and that recording was self-hypnosis. I knew how to do self-hypnosis. I'd been certified with the National Hypnosis group there. I've got my thing. I just saw it the other day. National Guild of Hypnotists, NGH, that's what it's called. And I knew how to do all this. So I recorded myself, hypnotizing myself to just get focused on this stuff and get it done. And it worked. I would just listen to this every day, and then I would just start to do the work, the mechanical work. And then eventually I just was able to do it without the recording. I've done this several times in my life, made tapes with affirmations, made tapes with, and affirmations, like we'll talk about a little bit later today, on basically based out of questions like these, in order to not have to rest on willpower, but rather just a procedure. And the procedure can be as simple as putting 2 earbuds in your ear, pressing play, and listening. I'm not necessarily saying that that's easy in and of itself, but it's just a way to get back on the horse, to go with Robert's framing there. And it's worked, because I've faced monumental tasks. I still do. The book I'm working on right now, it is so complicated. I have made it more complicated than perhaps it needs to be, but I don't want just some la-di-da book out there. I want it to be robust, and I want it to honor you as the people, even though some of the people will say, this is too robust. And then there'll be some people who are blind and will say, oh, this doesn't teach me anything. This is nothing new here. Blah, 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 blah. I'm used to that. And remember, I don't exist, so it doesn't matter. It doesn't hurt my ego whatsoever, because it's on its way out. It's dying as we speak. But in any case, it's not easy. It's not easy. Books are huge. They're big things, especially when they're going after big ideas. And the book that it's done is just now with this editing stage and me waiting and then all the photographs and all this stuff. It's like technical details and stuff like that. I still have to combat that insular cortex spike of pain that says, oh, that's still a lot of work. And then there's going to be launching it, promoting it. Oh man, there's so much to do. So I might put on one of those cassettes again. I don't really need to anymore though, because I now have memorized so much Sanskrit. And the Sanskrit starts off that I start off with almost every day, although I rotate around, but I usually like to start with this. It's just like, how do my thoughts behave? Are they useful? No, they're usually not useful. And so we just get down to work. So in follow-up, Robert says, thanks, Anthony. I agree. Always happiest with my practice in my day. I've skipped when a parent had just died. Life was my practice that day. But then again, my mentor, who once told me life takes discipline, any fool can be miserable, also told me that his mother prayed her daily rosary even at the end of the day when her husband had died. The subtle tension between a gentle light touch and a committed practice seems key for me. Right. And you're saying life was my practice that day. I think that's very, very important. That right there. Because, and I talk about this in the new book, I still have these things that come up. And actually Jeffrey Martin released a new course that touches upon this. And it's very, very interesting, where even though the ego just seems to be so little now, so small, so in a happy place when it emerges, and there's just this wonderful feeling most of the time, I'll still like have things that come up, and they're really interesting. So for example, I'm doing some stuff right now. I won't get into the whole story, but it involves a lot of paperwork, applications, yada, yada, yada. And it involves people who are assessing the validity of what I'm trying to apply for, and they're having issues seeing some of the things that are there, and I have to patiently write back, actually no, those things are there, and screenshot, arrow, etc. And my ego will come up, and anger will come up, and so forth. That's my practice in that moment. That life is my practice, and then I have to not punish myself because this manifestation of ego came, etc., etc. It's just what came. And then you interrogate, you dive into it, and you be grateful for the opportunity that you even paid attention to it not really being you, but rather this manifestation. So I love what you said there, Robert. Life was my practice that day. Life is my practice right now. Life is your practice right now. The question is, do you see this as practice? Then, practice for what? Well, I personally don't put any sort of woo-woo on it in terms of, well, in the great beyond, then this will pay off in karma, yada, yada, yada. I don't know at the end of the day. It doesn't seem reasonable to claim that one knows. A lot of people do claim that they know, but that's to their discredit. I'm much more open to just seeing what happens and just focusing on the now, right now, and only now. And so when you can just observe, like I have a friend right now who's in hospice, and it's, not that easy, but when I practiced today, I just practiced with her in mind, and what can you do? Life is our practice. Robert also said hedonic tolerance, i.e. expecting good feeling from good statements, may apply even to gratitude. I try to reach for the feeling state for me, using different ways, fresh ways to help bring the liminal. Yeah, I think that's important. We got to rotate. We got to have almost like a kaleidoscope of different things to try. I think that's very important. Thank you for that. Kirigami says, we'll definitely try these methods. You're a great guru, thoughtless mind like Neo's from Matrix. Thank you for these amazing sessions. Well, thank you. Putting me up there with Neo. Wow. That's very nice. In terms of guru, I would only be a guru in terms of the correct definition of that word, which is someone who casts light into darkness, or better said, helps you cast light into darkness, because we got a lot of darkness in the world. And I love the Greek word aletheia, which is truth, but it means uncovering, unhiding what's already there. Everybody already knows this stuff. It's just, are we casting light into the darkness of it to continually unload it, or to unhide it, better said, and then rest upon that fundamental truth that was always already there, and allow it to guide us, to help us. And in the Atmabodha, it says, the fifth verse says, constant practice neutralizes ignorance like a base neutralizes an acid, purifying the individual self, it says there. And that's very, very interesting because we are so ignorant of the truth of things, the underlying reality that's going on. But if we continually practice, then we're bringing light into that darkness. And so the guru can only be someone who does their own practice and basically helps you see that you're the only one who can do your own practice as well, and hopefully inspires you to do so. So I don't know that Neo has thoughtlessness in the Matrix. I don't know what scene you're referring to there, but free your mind, I think, is a line in the Matrix. And the thing to understand about the Matrix, I'm glad that you mentioned it, because a lot of people misunderstand it. That whole scene where he's like, "Oop, downloaded Kung Fu, I know Kung Fu." It doesn't mean that he downloaded Kung Fu. It means that he's now prepared to practice Kung Fu and to demonstrate Kung Fu in the moment of the test, right? So, and what's important to understand there is that Morpheus says, "Show me." And then he has to show him. And then after Morpheus is satisfied, so to speak, what comes next? Another test. And then another test. And then another test. And then there comes Matrix 2. Then there comes Matrix 3. Test, 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 test. That's the true meaning of I know Kung Fu in the Matrix. That you now are being tested. And you will be tested again and again and again and again, because knowledge without being tested is useless. And back to Robert's statement, life was my practice. So the quality of your knowledge of whatever it is you think you know, your Kung Fu, is going to be how it stands up in the test. Which is why I always like to use that line from Ghost Dog, where the basic thing is, I've never memorized the actual words, but I just change them around. It's that, you want to be prepared like the samurai to execute any last move, even with your head cut off, right? Because that's what a well-practiced person can do, is execute the last perfect move, even with your head cut off. And you want to live that way. You want to prepare that way so that when life is your practice, you come off happy and smiley and clean. All right, let's see here. Lovely chat today, discussion with you all. Adolfo is in the house. Hello, Adolfo. Good to see you. So wonderful that you're here today. Chroma Walking says, I'm going to listen to a Krishna chant in the AM. You convinced me to do all kinds of things. Well, indeed, that will be a story to tell. And you say, I take care of a 104-year-old lady who prays rosaries all day. She has that ingrained habit. Wonderful. That sounds amazing. I hope, well, I don't know. I don't know if I hope it or not. But if I live to 104, I hope that I'm still enjoying the ride as much as I am right now. All right. So thanks, everybody, for those chats. Keep them coming. If you're just joining us, hit the thumbs up. Let me know where you are in the world, what you're doing, what you're thinking. Let's talk more about these Bring Gratitude cards. I think we've covered the pitfalls to the nth degree. I'm sure there's more. But you can turn this into ongoing brain and memory exercise. So, Karl's basic premise here is to put them somewhere where you can see them, like on your toothbrush cup. And so imagine we had this one. It says, what do you think would help you smile just a few more times today? So this is one I think of one of the better cards because it has a question that taps into your memory. What do you think would help you smile just a few more times today? So you're then thinking, well, what would that be? And you sort of, even if it's a pitfall that you might think about yourself too much, then you go into your memory. And your memory is not you, so it can't be that much of a pitfall. What is your memory? Your memory is things that were outside of you that have become encoded inside of you. So it is you, but it isn't you at the same time. So if I think, what do I think would help me smile just a few more times today? Well, it would be, for example, more comments and questions and thumbs up from you guys. Not that I rely on thumbs up in particular, but that would make me smile a little bit more because you guys have so many amazing things to say. And even if I just look through the chat, I could probably start smiling already because I may have missed something. Like, for example, Daryl's thing to Kirigami. 144 methods, give or take. There, I got another smile just by looking through the chat and finding one that I missed. What else do I think could smile? Ooh, well, I'm going to see a friend of mine today. So maybe arranging another meeting with a friend could make me smile a little bit more. Now, how do we turn this into memory exercise? Well, I just think of my friend and I think about the last meetings that we have, and I think of every time that we've met. Can I go back to the very beginning and account for them all? Right? So that's a bit of a memory exercise coming out of there. Another example. What skills have you worked hardest to improve over the past 5 years? How did you do this? So I've worked on being able to write better over the past 5 years. How did I do it? Well, I started stuff. I took some courses. Oh, I'm getting more smiles out of that because I'm remembering some writing courses that I took. And great. So that's another thing. So just take these questions and start to associate them externally to yourself and go through your memory, go through it rigorously. And I might think of all the writing books that I've read. Saul Stein comes to mind, Stephen King on writing, etc. And just unpack that. Spend some time with a memory journal, writing it down on paper so that you're able to actually get it out of your head, be productive in a way that involves all your body, all your muscles. Because we know a lot of our thinking has to do with movement. And there's a lot of neuroscientific research that shows that there are little micro movements we make when we think. Well, why not make them macro movements? There's so much stuff to do with journaling that's so powerful and so important with your hands, not this device stuff, but actual paper, pen and paper and so forth. So that's how you can turn it into ongoing brain and memory exercise. And, we can just go through. I mean, you just got to get these cards. They're pretty cool. I like this one. What risk would you take if you knew you wouldn't fail? So how can you turn that into a memory exercise? Well, this could be one of those things that maybe can make some people sad, but I think it's worth, diving in, taking that risk. And you think, well, what would you do if you knew you wouldn't fail? So in my case, I would do this if I knew I wouldn't fail. So that's not that difficult. But, one of the things that I can think of is when I went on tour with a band and, I could have failed. It could have failed really, really badly because I had to move countries again. I had to get rid of all my belongings in order to make it happen. I had to go with a fledgling new business, having no idea whether it was going to work or not. Just seemed like magic. And I could have failed really, really badly. But I went and did it. So I'm not thinking of anything that I didn't. Going to get a PhD, I could have failed and so forth. I can't think of many things in my past, but you might think of that and think, well, now what could I do in order to work through those memories to change and think through what it was you might have done to get yourself to do it? What mindset would you have needed? What preparation would you have needed? What books might you have benefited from reading that would have given you more confidence, more courage, etc.? That can be a way to deal with that. But we're going to see also how to turn this into affirmations that you can memorize in a minute. So, Hockey says, good to see you, Hockey. Make me smile. My kid's doing something funny. And Michael McIntyre. Well, okay. I don't know who Michael McIntyre is or McIntyre, but kids doing something funny, that could definitely work for sure. And Daryl says Carrie Gamer says to Daryl, you'll take that. Maricela says, I'm just smiling because my mother is waiting impatient to go eat and I'm taking forever to leave from home. All right. Impatient mothers. That's an interesting image. Daryl says, for humans, that gave me a smile. Thanks. Indeed. Definitely for humans. All right. Now, the other thing that we want to think about is, and we really want to focus on positive memories out of these questions, because we know from Tim Dalglish's method of loci research that there's great benefits and boosts that come from when you take memories, put them in a memory palace, and then revisit them when you're feeling down. So one of these things, like what are your 3 greatest strengths, instead of just thinking, well, I'm good at writing, I'm good at whatever I'm good at. I don't know. What are you guys good at? Let me know in the chat if you care to share. And we'll see the 80-20 rule play out to be sure. If you're just joining us, hit the thumbs up. Let me know in the chat what you're good at and where you're from, what you're doing, what you're thinking, etc. Let's keep the action going and always enjoy being with you all, having fun. What else am I good at other than writing? I don't know. Maybe showing up for live streams frequently, etc. Strengths, consistency. That's probably the better way to word that. Now, in order to get this into a memory palace, if consistency were one of my strengths, which I imagine that would be true, then I would think of a memory of something related to consistency, and I'd put it in a memory palace. Now, this happens to gel with a mood adjuster memory palace that I already have, which, since I came across Tim Dalglish's research on the method of Loki for relieving symptoms of depression and anxiety, etc., I've been using this a lot whenever a little dip in mood comes, the rare time that that happens. And I have been just enjoying this so much because I just remember after I finished my doctoral dissertation, which was such a stressful occasion, and then doing magic tricks for everybody, making them smile. And this image, I got rid of all my stuff to go on tour with that band. So I'm going to maybe reach out to a few people to see if they have the picture. I remember there was a picture taken with those people, the committee, and I was doing magic for them. And I'll never forget one of them saying, "How do you have energy to do a magic show after you just sat for your dissertation defense?" Which they used to ask me too after I was on tour with the band, because I did 2 shows every night. I would do the show with the band, and then after, for all the people, I would do magic. And they'd be like, "How do you have the energy to do this after all this?" Don't know. Don't care. But I did. But it's partly because of consistency. When you practice so consistently, you're able to just perform on a dime, and you don't need the energy. So that's my happy memory there. Put it on station 1 in a memory palace. And then the thing is how do we turn it into an affirmation and memorize it? Now, my argument is that you can get all the affirmations in the world that you want from other people, but they're never going to be nearly as good as the affirmations that you create for yourself. So to transform that happy memory that calls back to a previous live stream that we did, I would turn it into an affirmation like, "I am always consistent and able to do magic in a flash for anybody." And so that would be an affirmation. So I've transformed this question from these cards into an affirmation, and now I just have to memorize that. So I've already got the memory, the happy memory in a memory palace, and now I just got to turn it into that question. I'm always able to perform magic consistently. I'm always consistently practiced with that to perform magic. You know, I got to like wordsmith it a little bit, make it a really cool affirmation. And then every time that I go through my affirmation memory palace, it's associated with a happy memory based on a strength that's true. And then we get procedural memory in this case, because there's a procedure involved in magic. And can't do magic worth a damn on live streams. I'm sorry, my hands get too sweaty. Although, maybe in the future I will, because my hands just get sweaty in general in Australia. And I just kept thinking, I'm not doing magic enough. And if it's my hands being sweaty all the time, maybe I need to come up with sweaty hand magic. And so I started to change my routines and my patter to refer to the fact that I can't do magic in Australia anymore. And I changed the tricks, and I actually built in what's called the magician in trouble principle, so that I'm actually always making mistakes, because I'm going to make mistakes because my hands are so sweaty here. I'm not going to carry powder around to dry my hands. I don't even think it would work because they're so sweaty here. But the whole point is that I found another way. And that's a key lesson in life, is find a way, one way or the other. Don't let your procedural memory die, because I was letting my procedural memory of the magic routines disappear. So I just had to come up with other stuff and start performing magic again. And I did, and now I just have incorporated my problem into the presentation, and I allow for the mistakes to be made, because now I have outs, because I've redesigned the whole routines to compensate for sweaty hands, make a story out of it, this crazy Canadian who can't handle the heat, so to speak, which then takes the heat off of me and allows me to do things. Anyway, that's a bit of a digression, but the whole point is that this particular affirmation of being able to do magic on a dime comes from this gratitude exercise. So the question turns into a transformation, and then I revisit that based on the strength of a happy memory. So memory palace, happy memory, transformation of the happy memory into an affirmation, memorize the affirmation. In this case, does it have to be verbatim and so forth? I probably won't bother to memorize the affirmation verbatim because I get the gist of it. But what I might do is make an audio recording, put it in my ears and listen to it, going through the memory palace and the memories as I listen to it, and really get that in until that it's pretty much there. And, you could memorize it verbatim. So I think that's pretty powerful exercise. But that's the thing. You've got to memorize them in some form and then practice recall so they get into long-term memory. Kirigami, thanks for having been with us. You say you got college calling. Well, don't miss college on account of this. There's always the replay. Happiness is the joy of giving. Thank you, Dr. Anthony, and guys, for your presence. Hope you all have a great day. Well, thank you, Kirigami, for being here. Your great questions, and really always wonderful to hang out, spend some time with you. Really appreciate it. Now, does that all make sense? Is that helpful? Is that useful for you? Let's see the 80-20 rule. See if it's happy and helpful for anybody. I highly recommend getting these cards. I've been having a lot of fun playing around with them, and I think that it would be good, and maybe Karl will put this up on his website, but some of the scientific data behind this research would be good, the actual research that he read. But I know that it exists in different forms, and it's absolutely true. And the idea of just taking one of these cards, placing it somewhere visible, will be very, very useful. You don't have to memorize the stuff itself in order to make this work. I love this one. What goal do you want to achieve that is worth struggling for? I like how that's worded because there's going to be struggles involved in achieving your goals. And sometimes those struggles will be radio silence. All right. So what goal? Let me ask you that. What goal do you want to achieve that is worth struggling for? I'd be very, very interested if people have goals that they think are worth struggling for. If not, why not? Let me know in the chat. We will take a quick pause, and then I will be back.
384626 4338 3279 5028 84 1971 69 399375.
Hi, my name is Paul, and I've taken a few courses by Anthony Metivier, but I felt that the experience of doing it today live was the biggest advantage. Anthony has a gift in simplifying complex concepts, and I feel that I've really come away today with practical skills that I can now use effectively. It was great to immerse ourselves in the situation, to be able to apply the time, because when we're at home we may not take the time to do the memory exercises that we were doing today. I felt particularly that the thing that we did at the end of today was something that is totally unique in memory training, which is 3 days of memory, which is how to practice your skills. I've read many memory books and I've never come across a system laid out as to how to practice what you've learned, and this is what I gained today from Anthony's course. So I'd give it 10 out of 10. Thank you.
5342 1170 679.
All right. Thank you, Paul, for that cool video. Amazing. Okay, so Denise says, struggling to become a nurse practitioner, and that's worth it. Yes, indeed. Nurses are very, very important. We need nurses. So you had said you're nursing in Indiana. Excellent, excellent. Thanks for being here, Denise, and thanks for saying that. And 80-20 rule in effect. Daryl says, your talks are always useful. Well, I'm glad to hear that, Daryl. I'm not actually fishing for any praise, but I'm kind of curious what you would like to all see next on the live stream. And I'm just, I'm wondering about these live streams, if they should continue. And knowing the 80-20 rule, I'm curious how many people would say, yes, continue them, or no. And I think that, that's just an interesting question to ask once in a while, because this is obviously something that we're very privileged to have this technology, and it's not clear that it's going to last, that we're going to continue to get to have it in today's current age, and it's not clear how long the internet is going to be what it is. So I'm kind of curious to what extent that this should continue. So if you're joining us now and you have thoughts about that, let me know. And if you are watching the replay and you have thoughts about it, let me know. If you're just joining us, hit the thumbs up. Let me know where you are in the world, what you're doing, what you're thinking. Get subscribed to this channel if you aren't already. And Daryl says, struggling to always remember and never forget is worth it for me. Great, great, great. So I guess the question is, how can we remove the struggle from that process and make it all fun? And one of the ways that we do that is by offering memory training in different ways. And it's very, very important to train your memory, because if you don't train your memory, it's not going to get trained. Nobody else can do it for you. I wish that it was possible for somebody else to do it for you, but everybody needs to show up. That's why we need continual exposure to what the techniques are, how they work, what we can do with them, the different range of possibilities, and to know that they work best when you actually have a goal for them and that you consistently show up to accomplish that goal over time. And Daryl says, auf jeden Fall, sehr gut, vielen Dank, wunderbar. Great, great, great. Ich liebe es, Deutsch zu lesen. Wunderschön. So Denise says, yes, please continue. Wonderful, wonderful. So let's look at a couple more of these. What incredible opportunities are available to you today? I think that's a really powerful one. That's worth memorizing just as it is. So how would we remember what incredible opportunities are available to you today? Well, I would want to start with a memory palace, and then you could use different tools like a alphabet list or a celebrity list. And in this week's dojo, probably going to go deep into the celebrity list issue. So make sure you get registered up for that if you aren't already, because that's an important thing, that tool. Need to know that. And you can use a memory palace to learn it. But we could go with that, or we could see something more, well, it always ends up being a celebrity list one way or the other. But words like opportunities and available, those can be a little bit challenging to memorize. So I would think of maybe OP for opportunities, and available. Avril Lavigne maybe comes to mind for available, and maybe she's availing something or unveiling something. And then today's interesting to think about. I would probably maybe use the Chinese character for that, something like that. Anyway, what incredible opportunities are available to you today? Helen says, awesome, thank you. Thank you, Helen, for being here. That I would love to know more, because a lot of people don't see the opportunities that are right in front of them, and I certainly don't see them all the time either. There's so many opportunities out there, and we can be blind to them. We get very, very blind to the things that are right in front of our faces, and that's a tragedy. How about this one? What part of yourself can you be more accepting of today? That is very interesting. Now, how are you going to turn that into an affirmation? That would be very interesting to think about. So imagine you allow yourself to find a memory around that where you can be more accepting of yourself, and put that in a memory palace, and then make an affirmation out of it. That could be very, very powerful. Oh, here's a very good one for memory exercise. Who has had the greatest influence on your career? Can you reach out to help them or thank them? So I actually do this one often, and that relates back to our nemesis idea. So major recommendation today, get these cards and watch the Eric Weinstein nemesis video. Well, Adolfo says, Captain Avery from Deep Space Nine. Right. So I never did watch Deep Space Nine very, very much. I've seen a couple of episodes. Was that, what was his name, Robert Picardo or something? I don't know. I don't know the Deep Space Nine enough, but I think he was in that series, wasn't he? Robert Picardo. I think so. Anyway, he's your AV. Right, okay, so Captain Avery. Wonderful. Yeah, so Adolfo has a very, very rigorous celebrity list, alphabet list. And you want to push towards that to be sure. So you could deal with words like opportunity very, very easily and available. So there's suggestions that come with this card too. This set of cards that are very good. It has a 30-day mindset reboot. And so when you get these cards at bringgratitude.com, there's actually another link on here to a quiz you can take that's very cool. And the suggestions on how to actually place them with your toothbrush and so forth that you can think about. So I highly recommend these. And wow, I just can't say enough about them. And I really want to thank Karl for sending them along. I like the website. I like the work that he's doing. And if you get some, please take a moment to let me know how you found them. And if you gave them a try based on what we talked about today in terms of using them not only to get more gratitude going for yourself, but also to transform them into affirmations and then memorizing the affirmations and thinking about, maybe one of the goals that you need to set for yourself is the ability to memorize affirmations if you don't already know how to do it. Daryl says, would love to see a live stream with your thoughts on the use of memory palaces to reform one's personality and or further one's self-evolution in the vein of the old Hermetics or Tantric practitioners. Okay, great. Thanks for that. Vielen Dank. I'm doing some research into Hermeticism now, and I think that really I've been teaching this all along when I say memorize information that improves your life. And that strong recommendation is prompting you to choose information that will reform your personality by default. So maybe we can live stream more specifically about that, but I feel that we've been live streaming about it all along, and the podcast has been going on and on and on about it all along. I guess what's missing there are some tools for people to figure out what's the baseline of their personality, which can be tricky, right? Because how do you test that those assumptions are true? And how does one do it in a way that doesn't trigger certain negative thoughts? Although, should we be trying to not trigger negative thoughts? There's a lot of problems right now with all this permission-based, trigger warning-based stuff that isn't really helping humanity because we don't get to have triggers on every little last thing. So, but by the same token, there's nothing to be gained by actually creating exercises that harm people. So I don't know what the exact answer is, but you would want to have a baseline. And perhaps the self-authoring program would be something that people could use there to develop that. And I've basically for many years had a version of the self-authoring program in the Self-Improvement Supercharger, and it just involves a little book like this and journaling and testing your own story about yourself and what you wish for. But yeah, having a baseline would probably be the thing that's needed in addition to all of this that I've been talking about now for so long. Great suggestion. Thank you for that. And I really appreciate everybody who was here today. And I hope that you're able to take some of these ideas and put them to work for yourself. And before we go, it's getting to be near the time when, if you don't have your calendar cleared for the 21st of September, the back to school special that I'm only doing once, big experiment, will come to a close at magneticmarymethod.com/SHL. Make sure to join us if you're interested. We will be covering the fundamentals of Memory Palace creation, specifically with a bent towards students, which means anybody who is serious about studying large projects that will improve your life, improve your personality, reform your personality, and just not maybe in the direct way that Daryl means, but certainly in a way that I think you get great results out of, because when you study information, it should be to be a better professional, someone who can contribute to society at a higher level, a more direct level that impacts more people, and in a way that you're not stressed about the outcomes all the time, and you're just allowing it to emerge, but not without having some objective behind it. So it's like a tension, right? How do you let go of outcomes and have an objective at the same time? Well, I hope I demonstrate this week after week, where it's just showing up regardless of any promise that anything's going to go any particular way. And that's one of the things we'll be focusing here, because one of the problems that so many people have when they come to large learning projects is that they can't let go of outcomes. So we'll talk about exactly how to do that with respect to actually building the memory systems that are needed in order to get the outcomes of the memory systems in the first place. So maybe that's too much of a mind warp. Not having an outcome while needing an outcome to make it worth it. Well, yes, those things can coexist. I assume that the people who sign up have enough wherewithal to allow that cognitive dissonance to happen and to just get busy, get your stuff prepared, and make some memory palaces, memorize some information, and be grateful and learn to be grateful by just doing the work of gratitude. Do it consistently, build systems that help you do it. And I hope that today's presentation helped you in that regard. And I hope that you have things to be grateful about. And even if you don't, just go for the obvious. If you had anything to drink today, then you have something to be grateful for. If you had anything to eat today, you have something to be grateful for. And here's the reality. If you're watching this presentation, you have so much to be grateful for. If you have a device, you have electricity, you have whatever got that device in your hand, you have an internet connection, even if it's in a public library or whatever the case might be, you have so much to be grateful for. Write it down. It's just that simple. Chris Bell is in the house. Great to see you, Chris. It's been a while. Daryl says, speaking of impacting people in a positive and life-affirming way, I get ready to work for now. Okay, knowledge into action, these practices into action, because they're really, really important. And yes, gratitude stirs up existing chemicals in your brain and just reminds you of all the wonderful things that you have, even if you have very little. The fact that you can participate in the internet, period, is incredible and worthy of great gratitude. Maricela says, I feel grateful just for you sharing memory methods with all of us. Well, thank you, Maricela. I'm so grateful that you help make it possible for me to share these methods, and every little interaction helps the robots know that people appreciate this. So hit the thumbs up if you haven't already. Let me know, if you're watching the replay, what thoughts you have about these cards, this very powerful tool, what we said about extending this tool into affirmations and memorizing them. And Daryl says, I'm grateful for every heartbeat, one love. Right back at you, brother. Very, very important. And if nothing else, go out and remember this. Be kind to other people. And until we have a chance to speak again, come visit me at magneticmemorymethod.com and keep yourself magnetic. Bye-bye.
Hey, everybody. So I'm here in the Atlanta airport. I was just thinking about how grateful and thankful I am for what Anthony did for me. I do seminars all across the country. Usually have about 100 to 300 people every single weekend. And one of my biggest goals was to be able to memorize their names, and started studying some stuff and learning. And it wasn't connecting as fast as it needed to. And I just wasn't connecting the dots, and started doing some research online. And there I found Anthony. And Anthony, I just want to tell you thank you very much for all that you've done. Now, man, my memorization is through the roof. I've almost reached my goal of getting 300 people at one time. I'm not exactly there yet. I'm off just by a few, but I'll get there as I keep practicing and keep connecting what I've learned from you and what you've put and you've helped me with. And so I just want to tell everybody, if you're looking to take your memory palaces and your memory techniques to the next level, I mean, Anthony's the guy. If he can help me go from not even remembering people's names, and that's the biggest issue of my life in my seminars, to actually being able to memorize over 100 and something people's names, close to 200. Man, he can help any of you guys out with anything. So I just want to give a shout out to Anthony. Very thankful, very grateful for meeting you. Very thankful for the fact that as soon as I sent you an email, you responded very quickly, very promptly. You just opened up your time and gave me a scheduled time very quickly also. And the support afterwards was well above and beyond. I mean, you could have ended it right there, but he didn't. He kept emailing me and make sure I was okay, and would send me emails periodically to make sure that I was following up and following through. So again, just want to thank you very much, Anthony. As I'm walking through this airport, getting ready to jump on a plane in Seattle, I was just thinking about how grateful and thankful I am for you being in my life and for helping me take those steps to the next level. And if anyone is out there is ever thinking about, should I work with Anthony, the answer is absolutely, unequivocally yes, beyond the shadow of a doubt. I could probably keep going on and on. But again, thank you, Anthony. And I really appreciate you. You've been a blessing in my life.